Leupold has been hitting it out of the park lately. With the introduction of the Mark IV HD series, I have found that everyone that I've gotten behind is at least very good. Some of them are even exceptional. So when one of my viewers sent in his VX-3HD 2.5 to 8 by 36 in the second focal plane, I was very excited. Now this optic is not going to be for everybody. Who is it going to be for? I'm going to just start that right off the bat, because if this is not going to be for you, why even watch the rest of the video? Unless you like listening to my sweet, sultry voice, in which case, kudos to you, fine individual. Anyway, this 11.96 ounce optic is super light. The only thing that's lighter than this is the SWFA Ultralight 2.5 to 10, which is very similar to this. However, this does have a CDS elevation turret, so you can dial for your dope quickly and easily if you so choose. Part of the reason for this thing's lightweight is its overall size. First off, it uses a 1-inch tube as opposed to a 30mm. That definitely helps cut down on weight, as does the fact this does not have a fast focus eyepiece. It has a standard locking eyepiece, which I prefer. A very simple twist of the lock collar and the eyepiece, and you have a nice tight setup that shouldn't loosen up on you. Another thing is the length. This thing comes in at 11.4 inches, which is very short. And just like most other Leupolds, the magnification throw on this thing is very short. And because it's an HD series, it has that wonderful knurled cattail, which I absolutely love. The magnification rings on the Leupold products of late are, without a shadow or question of doubt, my favorite. I love a short, sweet magnification, and I love a thick, heavy-duty, knurled cattail or throw lever. This way, you never have to worry about buying anything aftermarket. It's already included. And what Leupold has done here is just create excellence in the magnification ring world. Everything should be modeled off of this. Next up are the turrets. The windage is capped, and it's got that really cheap plastic, not great feeling turret. I don't particularly care for these. I've owned a couple of Vortexes over the years, and I've usually sold all of them just because I don't like how the turrets interfere. This is happily, however, only on the windage. So once you set it, you screw on the cap and you forget it. Happily, however, Leupold was smart enough to put their custom dial system on this, or CDS for short. What that means is you have a locking elevation turret with a zero stop, and every time you go back to zero, it locks in. Fantastic. We've seen these turrets already on the Mark IV HDs and the Mark V HDs. On this, it works very similarly to those two. However, this doesn't feel anywhere near as clean and polished as the other two. And it shouldn't, because this is a $500 optic, significantly less expensive than most of the other options. So in short, this is a very short and very lightweight, intermediate powered sort of variable optic. I mentioned earlier I was going to talk about who this is for. This is for someone that's looking to build something very lightweight, something very simple, and something very rudimentary. Think, if you will, of a backpacking gun or a truck gun, something where you just need it to be light and serviceable. But let's see how good it is to actually use. You can't get much simpler than a second focal plane duplex reticle. This not even having illumination or a side parallax means that this is all you're ever going to get. And happily, as we dial up the magnification, nothing changes. The view through it looks exactly the same. No weird shadowing or anything like that. It is completely standard. As you can see, it's not up to the standards of the Mark IV or Mark V HDs. We only get about 14 MOA of adjustment. However, if you were to put this in a canted mount, it would bring that up a little bit more. It is, however, still very nice to have. Despite the fact that this is still a set and forget style scope, I like to see how well all these scopes track. As far as adjusting the magnification, nothing shifts. The reticle does not shift on the target doesn't look weird or anything like that, no weird shadows or none of it. Windage has 0 slop to it, the turret is nice and tight. Windage is also in quarter MOA increments, as is the elevation. No slop to my eye on the elevation as well. Because we only have about 14 or so MOA of adjustment on the elevation, what that equates to here in mils is just about 4. So not the most amount of adjustability. However, it's only a 1-inch tube, and that's part of the reason. If you want more, or you think you might want more, think about running a canted mount. That should really help bring that up a little bit more. A hunting rifle is what this optic would be perfect for. A lightweight, very simple, probably very rugged. Leupold is known for making pretty good stuff, and I've loved my time with the Mark IV HD 2.5 to 10, and this has a lot of those same features, and I like that. It's great. Leupold's really been doing a lot of good things, I feel, with their products. This might not wow a lot of people because, again, it's so rudimentary and so simple, but I really do feel that a lot of people overcomplicate stuff for no good reason. With a simple duplex like this, it is easy to see at any sort of target, in almost any sort of lighting condition, as long as there's still ambient light out. Because there's no illumination, it's really hard to use this thing in pitch black environments, but in lower light environments like you'll see soon, it's great. And with a hunting gun or a practical use gun, setting up a combat zero, like for example, a 36 or 50 yard zero on a 5.56 gun, will theoretically get you out to 300, maybe even 400 yards on a man-sized target with a center hold. That's exactly what a duplex like this would be ideal for. Literally set it and forget it, hold and do your best behind the gun to make sure you do your best downrange. Optically, at this 81 yard paper target, despite the fact this is set at 100 yard PLxC, I believe, I got to double check that. But regardless to that, image here at 8x is excellent. There's no loss of brightness to my eye, and sharpness is very good despite the fact that the side parallax is not perfectly set up. As far as our Eyebox goes, here at 8x, shifting it side to side, you can see we hit the shadows, but it takes a while to get there. Keep in mind, folks, this is only a 3x multiplier, very, very small. The next step up from this would be a 3x9, so very, very old school as far as the magnification multiplier goes. But that should give us less stressed or glass that has to work less. And being a 2.5 to 8, it's not a very wide range, but what it does have so far is seeming to be a very good usable range. Image stability on this thing is very good. At 8x, it's a little bit soft when you're off center, but once you dial it back, it turns into an absolute wonderment to get behind. Let me make that live for you a little bit better. The Eyebox on this thing at 2.5x is insane. It is absolutely insane. Very flat image, very clear image, very sharp image. It is basically perfect. I would not want or ask for any optic to be better than what this is. It really is that good. And again, if you're building this or if you're putting this on a lightweight hunting or truck rig, it's great because you leave it at 2.5x and you can get behind the gun in almost any position and still use it effectively. At around 5x, we still have an extremely good performance, more than capable Eyebox, very forgiving, and again, very flat, sharp, clear image. Nothing to complain about. No loss of brightness that I can see to my eye. As far as the overall brightness to this thing, I could not see any difference regardless of magnification and regardless of environmental brightness. At 8x, it does get a little bit on the tighter side, but shooting 8x in anything other than a prone or very stable position is probably not going to happen. And because this is second focal plane with a duplex, you don't necessarily have to use it, especially if you're using a combat zero, to make an effective shot at any distance that you'd probably be engaging in. You don't have to be at any particular magnification, just shoot the thing. In my backyard, again, with a slightly lower light environment, you could see the sun is just over the top of the mountain range, top of the trees. And it's getting a little bit dark. I usually like to go a little bit darker, but unfortunately, the last few times I tried going a little bit darker, I ended up getting to the point where I couldn't film because it got too dark. There's a deer that wanted to pose for the camera. This is exactly what you'd be looking at about 50-ish yards on a deer with this optic at 2.5x. Pretty damn impressive. Reticle is very easy to pick up. You could see just above the shoulder, actually just behind the shoulder. And what more could you really ask for? Sharpness, clarity, brightness from 2.5 to 8x is exceptional with this thing. And again, you have that sweet, sweet eyebox. I don't know the exit pupil sizes on this, but I do know the eye relief, or at least what the quoted eye relief is. And Leupold claims it's 3.6 to 4.4 inches, and I believe it's even more forgiving than that. This is what this scope is designed for, a very small, lightweight hunter. Something that you just want to get on target really quick with, really simple, without any sort of thinking. Just get on target and do your job to pull the trigger as smoothly as possible and run the gun as fast as you can. Look at all the information we're able to see in these dead trees, in these dead bushes. Everything is sharp and clear. You can make out a lot of the different components and everything out there in the wild, and it's awesome. At maximum magnification, it only looks better. This thing's great. I love it. I really do love this thing. I'm getting way ahead of myself because I sometimes do that. But when something really excites me, I get really excited for it. There's nothing else to really say about that. Moving the camera to the left of the optic so we could look at the target's downrange with as little in the way as possible, and getting back behind the scope, you can see fairly easily that there's almost no loss of brightness that I was able to pick up. Tremendous performance. However, you might want to push this optic a little bit past 100 yards in your backyard. So we're going to see how well this is going to do at longer range. But first, a real quick pan across more dead brush area, just to showcase how wonderful a duplex reticle can really be. A lot of people would say it's too simple, I don't like it. And you know what? I was one of those people not that long ago. But everything has its place, and on a very simple KISS style rifle, you really can't beat a duplex reticle. They don't cost that much to produce, they're very simple and effective to use, and you know what? Sometimes the simpler is better. At 8x at 360-ish yards, can't really complain too much about this image. There were some weird overcast light shadows happening. It was very early in the morning when I filmed this. Usually I try to film it later on in the afternoon, but again, my schedule sometimes doesn't allow for everything to be perfect. But guess what? You might go out and go shooting and it might not be perfect. Out here at this distance at 360-ish yards, I can't really fault this image at all. Pushing it out to 1,000 yards, you could already see the heat mirage in the air coming from the warmer sun peeking through and the very cold air. I think it was like around 30 degrees Fahrenheit or so. 1,000 yards, would you ever push this optic to that distance? I don't know, but maybe you just want to do a little bit of scouting and you don't have a set of binoculars, or you're just on the gun and spotting for someone else. At 1,000 yards, you could probably notice some splash as long as it was in loose packed dirt or something like that, or on rocks. If it was on grass or trees or something like that, you might not pick up the shot, because 1,000 yards at 8x, it's not a lot of magnification. But if you did want to push it out this far, just know it does look pretty decent. And when we dial up all the way on the elevation turret, again about 14 MOA, it doesn't seem like it makes that much of a difference overall, whether it be optical sharpness, brightness to the image, or anything like that. And it looks basically about the same. All in all, again, I can't really fault this thing too much. Before we get into the side-by-side comparisons, I need to make an apology. I'm mistaken this thing for a Mark III HD from now until the end of the video. So just so there's no confusion, every time I mention the name Mark III HD, I am of course referring to the VX-3HD, which I am reviewing. Unfortunately, sometimes there's multiple days before I could start and finish a video when I do post-editing, and this is one of those times where I just got sidetracked. I sincerely apologize, but my beliefs on this optic still remain the same. But see, I want to buy a scope that's about the same price and has a lot more features going for it. Well, the Athlon Helos BTR Gen 2 is one that I could wholeheartedly recommend after multiple years of beating the ever-loving crap out of it. When I filmed the segment with the Helos, my focus was a little bit off at the lower magnification. I apologize for that. That's why at 2x here, it doesn't look anywhere near as good as how the Mark III HD does at 2.5x. The specs, though, are like this. Price-wise, they're very similar. The Helos can sometimes be found for a little bit less money. Length-wise, the Helos is only 0.4 of an inch longer at 11.8 inches. However, it's more than twice the weight at 25.4 ounces. That's very heavy compared to the svelte 11.8 from the Mark III. As far as our field of view, they're going to be skewed a little bit, again, because of the magnification differences. With the Helos, we have 55.7 to 9.6. And with the Mark III HD, 37.5 to 13.7 or so. Is that a huge difference? Why, yes. 4x is pretty significant, as you could see here on these 100-yard paper targets that are the same. The image on the Mark III HD, however, looks absolutely sensational despite the fact it doesn't have an adjustable side parallax. The Helos does have a side parallax, and I usually find that if I keep it between the 2 to 500 yard range, it'll basically cover most of its bases as far as different distances go. As far as which one of these optically I think is superior, it's definitely the Mark III HD. The Helos is very good, especially for a very inexpensive Chinese-made optic, but the Mark III HD just has a little bit more life to the image, a little bit better contrast, and again, it's a much easier optic to get behind. It might be a little bit smaller and a lot lighter, but optically, it really is a powerhouse. Now, these two are not necessarily directly comparable to one another. Magnification, weight, that being, the two big factors. But these two could be used in a varying amount of similar roles. I do feel like the Mark III HD is more set up for a hunting KISS style rifle, whereas the Helos can do a little bit of tactical and a little bit of hunting and almost everything in between. And it's done a very good job of that for me since I bought it, 2 years ago, something like that. And it's been excellent. However, the Mark III feels much better in hand. It is a little bit smaller, a lot lighter, and a lot simpler. There's less to go wrong with the Mark III. Could you be on the fence buying these two? Absolutely. If you want to buy something that's simpler, lighter, a little bit better built, go with the Mark III HD. If you want something that is going to give you a lot more flexibility in its overall uses and you don't mind a little bit of weight, or a scope that doesn't feel anywhere near as good in hand, definitely check out the Helos. It is a great option. What happens if you're a little bit more flexible on your budget, but you don't know if you want a Mark III HD or a Mark IV HD? Both of these have the same minimum magnification, 2.5x. However, on the top end, the Mark IV goes to 10, and the Mark III is only 8. Now, you can get the Mark IV HD in second focal plane with TMR reticle. However, this is the first focal plane TMR illuminated reticle, and both of these reticles at this magnification look quite similar as far as their overall stadia line thickness is concerned. Definitely the duplex of the Mark III HD is a little bit thicker, but as we increase the magnification with the Mark IV HD on the TMR, you're going to see that it is going to get much closer to how the Mark III looks, and in fact, be a little bit thicker than how the Mark III is. A lot of people would complain that with the Mark IV HD, it's going to obscure a lot of the target, and it does. I can't fault them for that. They do offer a non-illuminated version of the TMR, which apparently has a much finer stadia line, and the PR1, but only in MOA, I think, right now. I would love to see a PR1 mil reticle for the Mark IV HD. I think that would be really sweet. As far as how these two scopes look optically, I have to give it to the Mark IV, but only probably because it was filmed on a much brighter day. The Mark III was filmed on a very overcast, cloudy day. But it still has to go with the Mark IV. The Mark IV is just a better overall package. And it should be for the price. For this particular version, it's a little more than twice the price of the Mark III at about $1,200-ish. Lengthwise, though, it's about an inch or so longer than the Mark III. And weight-wise, it's only 10 ounces heavier at 21.5 ounces. It's really not that much. The field of view difference is also pretty noticeable. For the Mark III, it's 37.5 to 13.7, and with the Mark IV, it's 42.2 to 11. So it's a much larger field of view at the minimum magnification, and the view through it is a little bit larger, but not by a significant enough margin to really have it be talked about. Which one is going to be a better purchase for you? Again, if you're on a tighter budget and you're looking for something very simple, the Mark III HD could absolutely fit that bill. However, if you want one of the best overall packages I feel right now for the money in the optics world, the Mark IV HD 2.5 to 10 by 42 in the first focal plane should absolutely be on your short list, and I will take that to the grave. You know what, see, I think I don't need anything more than 8x. However, I want lower magnification. Well, you are going to be looking at something perhaps like this. The PLxC second focal plane 1:8 by 24 LPVO. This optic costs 3 times the price of the Mark III HD. It comes in at 17 inches, or just shy of 6 inches longer than the Mark III. However, the PLxC is only 9.2 ounces. That's right, it's lighter than the Mark III HD. Field of view, not even comparable. 121 feet for the PLxC versus 37.5 or so for the Mark III. And at the maximum magnification, the PLxC is also much larger at 15 feet versus just about 11. Now, the PLxC is not the best overall 1:8 in second focal plane that I've ever reviewed. I might be talking about that one next, but it's another great option for something that's extremely high quality and feels excellent in hand. The Japanese optics that Primary Arms produces, or rather sells, are really awesome as far as the controls go. And the PLxC, whether it's the first focal plane or the second focal plane, are really towards the top of the market. The Nova Reticle is also exceptional, as is the illumination. Still very simple, similar to the Duplex of the Mark III HD, but it gives you a lot more information that you could play around with it for wind holds or elevation drops if you so choose. And that fiber dot illumination, oh boy, is that just heartwarming to see. This is, however, again, 3 times the price of the Mark III HD, and I don't know if it's necessarily a 3 times the price performing optic, because in a small, very short, lightweight package like the PLxC, being an 8x multiplier, whether it's in the first focal plane or the second focal plane, is going to really stress the glass out. It's trying to do too many things at once. Like a 500 horsepower front-wheel drive Civic with an open diff. It just can't put the power down sometimes. It might have it, but only in like perfect conditions. And on this day that I filmed with the PLxC, it was a bright, sunny, beautiful day, and that's why the image looks as good as it does, especially on center. But look at the outside edge. If you're looking out into the real corners of these optics, the Mark III is a superior optic. Granted, the PLxC has a much larger view looking through it and a much smaller scope body. It really is beautiful as far as the ratios go. It's still stressed out a little bit too much, but it does have a wonderful 1x, and that is something that you can't really take away from it. As far as these two being comparable to one another, I do think that they could dance in the same platform, but it's a bit of a stretch going for something that's 3 times the price of the Mark III HD. But don't worry, dear viewer, because Vector has your back with the Continental 1:8 by 24 in second focal plane fiber dot illuminated reticle. They do have a couple of different reticles for this optic. Not all of them are going to be fiber dots, however. If you really want true daytime bright red dot bright illumination, you got to go with the fiber dot. This is around the $550-ish mark. However, if you use code CDOES on checkout, you get 10% off your order from any of the Vector websites. So go check those out. Whether you're in the US, you're in the EU, or you're in another global country, go have at it. Weight-wise, the Continental is heavier, 18.7 ounces, but still relatively lightweight. Length, it's basically the same at 11.4 inches. Field of view, just like we saw at the PLxC, 123 to 15.3 feet, and it is going to be a little bit better than the Mark III HD. The view through the Continental is huge. The glass on it is extremely sharp and clear, and unlike the PLxC, which is significantly shorter than the Vector Continental by more than 2 inches, that extra little bit of length in the Continental I feel allows the glass to breathe and work a little bit better. Both of these here at 185 yards on the steel targets in that berm look excellent. I might still give the edge to the Mark III HD, but only by a small margin, not anywhere near of a big margin as we saw with the PLxC. I do feel that these two are a very fair comparison to one another. They both have very usable 8Xs. They're both about the same price. Weight-wise, yeah, one's heavier than the other, but not by such a drastic amount that you're going to not be able to use the firearm as a backpacking gun or throw it on your back and go for a 4-mile hike. Sure, ounces equal pounds when you're rucking something, but it does give a lot more flexibility at the lower magnification. Now, some people would probably say, yeah, you know what, I like the Mark III HD, I don't mind 2.5 to 8x because I'm going to be running an offset red dot anyway. That's going to add to the price and add to the weight, and if you were to just run a 1 to 8 like the Continental, it would probably be less expensive and probably about the weight, if not even lighter, than a red dot Mark III HD combo. But that is just food for thought. If I'm being brutally honest, if I was building, again, a KISS truck gun where I'm going to be using it out in a field or a ranch, I actually prefer having a little bit of magnification down low. And something like 2.5x, from my experiences with running the Mark IV HD 2.5 to 10 as much as I actually have grown really fond of it. However, something like the Continental, again, you can dial it to 2.5x and leave it there. However, the Eyebox of the Mark III HD is vastly superior to that of any of the other scopes that we've looked at. Maybe it's my old age, maybe it's my experiences in life, but I've grown to appreciate and admire simpler things. Because sometimes, and I know this now, looking back at my life, we like to overcomplicate things. And I feel reticles and scopes as a whole is definitely one of them. Now, sure, there's a time and a place for everything. I'm not going to suggest putting this optic on your F-class gun and go shoot a 600-yard competition. But if you're looking to build a lightweight 22, a ranch gun, a truck gun, a beater gun, a plinker gun, a backyard gun, an optic like this could serve you better than I think you might even know. Do you necessarily need illumination? No. Unless you're going to be shooting a lot in lower light environments, or you want to run it like a prism or a red dot up close, I really don't feel you're going to need illumination, especially with a duplex reticle like this that's easy to read and pick up at any magnification because it's in the second focal plane. If right off the bat you say to yourself, I need illumination, then obviously the scope is not for you. This is going to be for anyone that, again, wants to keep things as simple, as lightweight, and as small as possible. And I know that there's a big market for that. Is this the best overall hunting scope? No. But if you're in the Northeast like I am, and your max shot's going to be probably 200-300 yards on a good shot on a doe in heavy brush, then you really don't need much more magnification than this. Sure, I didn't do any drop tests or freeze tests or dunk tests with this optic. Who knows if it might just fall apart after a couple hundred rounds. I put a couple hundred rounds through this on a 5.56, and you know what? It worked just fine. Optically, this thing having the large eyebox that it does really makes it enjoyable to use. It's very small, it's very light. It doesn't look like it would be quick to get behind, but it is so enjoyable to get behind and just be in different positions behind it because it's always there to give you the best performance it could possibly do. And a lot of that is down to the 3x multiplier that this thing is based around. Again, it's a very old multiplier. I think it's actually the first real variable powered optics where I think 3 to 9. I could be wrong, but I know that they were one of the first, if not the first. And yeah, it's probably 60, 70 years old, the design, maybe even older than that. I really need to brush up on my scope history. I think that'd be a fun channel, Optics Through History. But segueing, I gotta stop. This is a great optic. It is $500. Yes, you can get a lot of other scopes that will offer you more for your money. I've already showcased several of them. But if you're looking for something as simple, as rudimentary, and as basic as possible, that's going to give you amazing performance optically, Eyebox-wise, and just enjoyment-wise from use, I really don't think you can fault this Mark III HD in any way, shape, or form. I've really grown to love this. A huge thank you to my supporter for sending this in. I'm sorry I had it for as long as I did. I put it off for way too long, and then once I started using it, I didn't want to stop. So, thank you very much, and thank you all very much for watching at home or at the office or on the road or wherever you are. Maybe you're watching this in space. That'd be pretty freaking cool. Anyway, I really do appreciate you all. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.